With a new COVID pill being proven to be only 30% effective, what's the real reason it's been approved? Hello there, you 4.5 million wonders. Thank you for watching us, joining us on this channel. We love you, whether you agree with us or don't agree with us. We welcome your opinions. We welcome you, whoever you are, wherever you're from. Let us join together, find new alliances, create new systems, first in our imagination, then in reality, like all systems. If you're in the UK between January and May, come and see me. I'm doing shows at the Hammersmith Apollo all over the UK. There's a link in the description. You can come see me if you want to. Now, this is a video about the newly approved COVID pill with a 30% efficacy rate, about which I have no opinion. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I've only just got this nice new woolly cardigan, and I'll tell you now, it's a bit itchy. So in this video, all we're talking about is the relationships between the FDA, Big Pharma, government and lobbying. We're talking about these relationships which can be demonstrated. Here are the sources. I have no opinion on this new COVID medication. It might be wonderful, it might not be. The indications from the clinical trials is that it's 30% effective, and I offer no opinion other than it is 30% effective. You could say that that's in a glass half empty type way. It's 70% not effective. To Her Majesty the Queen and her friends at Merck. An expert advisory panel for the Food and Drug Administration has narrowly voted to endorse the authorisation of Merck's COVID-19 oral pill for high-risk adults. The drug, known as molnupiravir, was recommended in a 13-10 vote after data were presented showing its modest effect on reducing hospitalisation. The decision was made despite members of the panel going back and forth on the drug's effectiveness, safety, and whether it could potentially aid the virus's mutation capabilities. Bloody hell, 10 of the 23 people went, oh, don't look at this. What if it aids the virus's mutation capacity? Well, that's 13. We like it. I was not convinced that the potential benefit outweighed the risk, said Dr. Pete Weiner. Don't be so bloody childish. The director of the Office of Research Protections at the Defence Health Agency. A final analysis showed that the pill reduced hospitalisation and death by 30%. Maybe that's good. I don't know. Maybe that's good. I mean, if you were one of that 30%, I'm sure you'd be grateful. Despite an interim clinical trials finding that molnupiravir cut the risk of both in half. A Merck executive said he didn't have a satisfying answer on the discrepancy. Do you have a satisfying answer? No, I don't have one. Well, can you bloody well get one? It's also unknown what effect, if any, the pill has on the Omicron variant. The efficacy of this product is not overwhelmingly good, one panel member said. I think we really have to be careful about saying that this is the way to go, said Dr. David Harvey, who still voted to recommend the drug. So even some of the people who voted for it weren't that bloody convinced. Okay, so let's have a look at how much it's going to cost. David Sirota, writing on Daily Poster, said, "We now routinely face immoral situations, like last week's news that pharmaceutical giant Merck is planning to charge Americans $712 for a COVID drug that only cost $17 to produce and whose development was subsidised by the American government." That is astonishing, isn't it? And it is indeed immoral. You pay for that, Americans, and now when they're selling it back to Americans, even though it's only 30% effective, they're charging 70 quid. It should be 30% of 17, given that it's 30% effective, which I think is about $8. No, 7. 6. Oh, damn you, maths. Sirota continues, that's just the latest example of the absurd paradigm. We take the risk of investing early in the product, but instead of that investment reaping us something valuable like affordable prices, we are rewarded with price gouging by the drug makers that bankroll the lawmakers who've rigged the rules and aim to keep them rigged. I've seen this a lot, haven't you? The expenditure of development is the responsibility of the public, and the profits continually find their ways into the hands and pockets of private corporations. Remember our oft recited paradigm that the job of government is to take money from you and give it to corporations. If you sort of see that as their primary function and the kind of pose of law and order as some sort of secondary dance and the imposition of a moral stance as some sort of bagatelle, some accessory to the primary function of extracting wealth from ordinary people and giving it to corporations, then things make more sense. They certainly don't make less sense. That's not a free market, it's a top-down command economy perfectly calibrated for price gouging, and the pharmaceutical industry and its puppet politicians want to keep it that way. Do you see that the mantras of free markets that are continually used to prevent alternative ideologies from gaining any traction in the public sphere are not being adhered to even by those who espouse them? Calibrated market, public funding, profits returning into corporate hands. It seems to be a set of relationships that are interdependent, that hold one another up while just doing what's necessary to prevent the sphere of their influence and power and privilege being burst. So when you find out that a pill is only 30% effective, and when you begin to understand the relationships between the government, the FDA and Big Pharma, you begin to question what motives and agenda might be at play when a drug of that nature is approved. It makes you query whether or not it's about medical efficacy or profit. Let's see if lobbying could play any part in this. Big Pharma is still the largest lobbying spender. The pharmaceuticals and health products industry spent about $92 million on lobbying in the first quarter of the year, more than any other industry. Wow, just in a quarter of a year, 3 months, 30 million a month. £1 million a day. £1 million a day of that profit that you paid for in some cases goes into bending the ear of government officials into creating structures, administration and bureaucracy that is advantageous to them. So when a new 30% effective pill appears on the market, do you think it has a connection with that 30 million a month of lobbying? A new House report targets 14 pharmaceutical companies for spending more on stock buybacks and dividends than they did on research and development over a 5-year period. So in a sense, the pharmaceuticals is just a side hustle. The real business is the stock buybacks and dividends. That's extraordinary. The 14 companies spent a combined $31 million in the first quarter of 2021 on lobbying. Pfizer spent the most of the 14 companies on lobbying. So if a company spends a lot of money on lobbying and then seem to find themselves in an advantageous position, do you think that there is a connection between the lobbying and the advantage? Increasingly, it's getting difficult to discuss those things. Recently, we talked about Trevor Noah getting criticised for suggesting that the president of Moderna or Pfizer or one of them had profits in mind when sort of publicly lobbying for new booster shots around the Omicron variant. How can it be, oh, you're anti-vax, you're suspicious. You wouldn't get people being cynical, suspicious and full of doubt if there was an open public discourse and clearer, more defined and regulated relationships between government and the pharmaceutical industry. Like every avenue of potential dissent is shut down. Freedom of speech, criticism, jokes, conversation, all shut down. Not because, to protect you, to protect me? No, to protect them. Now, we've talked about Big Pharma, we've talked about the government, we've talked about lobbying, but we should be okay because the pharmaceutical industry, they're not just out there doing what they want, like the Wild West, creating things, selling things. They're regulated by the Food and Drug Administration. Whether it's food or drugs, there's an agency for you doing good old-fashioned regulating. The FDA has moved from an entirely taxpayer-funded entity to one increasingly funded by user fees paid by manufacturers that are being regulated. So the FDA is increasingly funded by the people it regulates. So you fund the research, they lobby the government, the FDA is paid for by the companies that it regulates increasingly. Do you think that sounds like a recipe for transparency, authenticity, integrity, efficacy? Or do you think that it's not unfeasible that could create a climate where profit is ceded to the forefront of people's minds? Today, close to 45% of its budget comes from user fees that companies pay when they apply for approval of a medical device or drug. I mean, isn't that mental, a user fee? We know what that is. That's a kind of a compliance fee. They dress it up in little bits of language, but there's a financial relationship between the regulatory body and the companies that they're regulating. Do you not see how that could create corruption? Changes in more recent years have also increased the number of standard new drug applications approved the first time round by the FDA from 38% in 2005 to 61% in 2018. Do you know, since they started paying us to regulate them, I find myself approving of more and more of their drugs. This just in, we got a new drug. Where's the money that you give us when you need approval? Oh, there's the money. And there's your approval. Everything's fine. In diseases where there are not many medication options for patients, 89% of new drug applications were approved the first time round. Wow, that's worse, isn't it? When you've not got many options, nearly 90% of them are approved first time. Most recently, the COVID-19 pandemic has seen FDA provide emergency use authorization for potential treatments in a matter of weeks not months. Now, obviously we have no opinions on the ins and outs of medical matters about which I'm not qualified to pontificate, but what we can point out using hard evidence gleaned by professional journalists, compiled here by us on this channel, is that there are relationships between the government, big business, regulatory bodies that might lead to a new wonder drug with a 30% efficacy rating getting approved for market because of the conditions, the environment, and what that environment advantages and what the priorities of those relationships are. But that's just what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. If you're concerned about lobbying, if you're concerned about new regulations that are being passed, new laws that are being passed, whether or not there's enough scrutiny about certain medical procedures, let me know below. We read all the comments. We stay engaged with you. Give us a thumbs up and give us a thumbs down if you want to, but that'll be bulleted off into a quiet little corner of the cosmos. Also, please, if you enjoyed this video, have a look at this one where we go a bit deeper into the FDA situation. Or you can watch this on my Awakening side channel. Please sign up to my mailing list. I'll tell you what I'm reading, what I'm doing, what I'm up to, and come and see me between January and May. I'm in Hammersmith in London. I'm all over the UK. You can come see me live and we can be together. Stay free.